August 23rd, 1954, a plain-looking cargo plane takes off on a routine test flight. It was designed to last just 15 years and then disappear like every other Cold War workhorse. Instead, what follows is an aviation paradox. 7 decades later, that same design refuses to die, outlasting every replacement and flying missions that range from hurricane hunting to airborne gunship operations. How did a so-called obsolete transport become the only plane that grandsons still fly in the same cockpit as their grandfathers? And why has every attempt to retire it failed? The answer rewrites what we think we know about military innovation. In early 1951, a group of Air Force planners gathered around a problem that seemed impossible to solve. The world had changed after Korea. The old transports, C-47s and C-130s, were slow, underpowered, and they struggled with the rough, short airstrips that defined Cold War flashpoints. The new requirement was blunt. Move 92 troops or 64 paratroopers, plus vehicles and supplies, more than 1,100 nautical miles, then land on dirt, gravel, or whatever passed for a runway. The plane had to be fast enough to keep pace with jets, and slow and steady for safe airdrops. Above all, it needed to be reliable, field repairable, and ready for the next mission before the dust settled. Lockheed's design team, led by Willis Hawkins, faced a choice: play it safe with piston engines or gamble on something new. They picked 4 Allison T-56 turboprops, each delivering 3,750 horsepower. Turboprops offered jet fuel efficiency, with the mechanical simplicity and low speed thrust needed for short, rough runways. The high-mounted wings gave the propellers room to spin clear of rocks and debris, and they let the landing gear sit low for easier loading. Underneath, a pressurized cargo hold ran the length of the fuselage, unheard of in military transports, allowing high-altitude operations and much better crew comfort on long flights. But the real breakthrough was in the back. Instead of a side door, Lockheed engineers designed a full-width rear ramp. Vehicles could drive straight in or out, and pallets could be loaded or dropped in seconds. No other transport at the time could match that flexibility. The ramp, combined with the low-slung fuselage, turned the cargo bay into a rolling warehouse, ready for anything from artillery to ambulances. The Air Force Requirement Board, led by officers who had seen too many failed airlifts in the last war, pushed for ruggedness over glamour. Every bolt and every access panel was designed for rapid repair in the field. The structure was simple, but it was overbuilt, able to survive hard landings and keep flying with damage that would ground most aircraft. The design called for a minimum range of 1,100 nautical miles, a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, and the ability to fly at 280 knots for transit and 125 knots for precision drops. On July 2, 1951, Lockheed won the contract. The physical template was set: high wing, turboprop engines, rear ramp, pressurized hold. This was not a plane built for the spotlight. It was built to do the jobs nobody else wanted, and to do them anywhere on Earth. August 23, 1954. Just after sunrise in Burbank, California, the YC-130 prototype rolled onto the runway for its first flight, an odd-looking machine with high wings, a bulbous nose, and 4 massive turboprops. In the cockpit, test pilots Stan Belts and Roy Wimmer scanned their checklists. The plan was simple: get airborne, fly to Edwards Air Force Base, and see if this ungainly box could actually deliver what Lockheed had promised. The throttles advanced. The Allison T-56 engines roared to life, each pouring out 3,750 horsepower, raw power. The YC-130 surged forward, reaching takeoff speed in just 800 feet, less than a quarter the length needed by the transports it was meant to replace. The wheels left the ground, and the prototype climbed steadily, surprising even the flight engineers, Jack Reel and Dick Stanton, who monitored every gauge and vibration. In the chase plane, Kelly Johnson watched as the new aircraft banked smoothly toward the desert and radioed back that it flies better than it looks. For 61 minutes, the YC-130 proved itself in the air. It handled light, stable, and powerful, without the sluggishness that plagued older cargo planes. The pressurized hold kept the ride comfortable at altitude. The engineers noted how the high wing gave perfect clearance for rough strips, and the rear ramp, locked tight for now, hinted at a new era of cargo loading. By the time the wheels touched down at Edwards, the test crew knew they had something special. Belts would later say it just did what you asked, no drama. Word spread quickly through Lockheed and the Air Force. The prototype's performance was not just good. It was a leap forward: the short takeoff, the power, the handling, the rugged build. Pilots and ground crews started calling it the Herc, short for Hercules. At first it was half joke, half respect, a nod to the way the plane looked like it could haul the world on its back. But the name stuck. In break rooms and hangars, early cargo crews started wearing it like a badge. They were not flying glamorous fighters. They were hauling the mail, moving the gear, running into places where runways were just suggestions, and the weather did not care about schedules. The Herc's first flight was not just a technical success. It set the tone for an entire culture: quiet pride, confidence in the machine, and a sense that this humble airlifter might be capable of things nobody had imagined. The legend was already taking root, one flight, one crew, one call sign at a time. By 1964, the C-130 Hercules had become a familiar sight on airstrips from Da Nang to Khe Sanh. Its job was simple: move what needed moving, wherever it was needed. The Herc's cargo bay filled with everything from ammunition to medical supplies, and its wheels touched down on runways that were sometimes nothing more than cleared dirt, pocked with craters and littered with debris. Each mission meant threading through valleys and hugging tree lines, where enemy gunners waited with anti-aircraft guns and small arms, hoping to catch a slow-moving target in their sights. The threat was constant. C-130 aircraft flew low and slow, making them easy marks for ground fire. Crews braced for the staccato thump of rounds punching through aluminum skin. Over the course of the war, 55 Hercules aircraft were lost to enemy action, one of the highest loss rates for any airlifter in U.S. service. Every approach to a forward base was a gamble. Pilots learned to land fast, offload in minutes, and get airborne before the next mortar round whistled in. Loadmasters moved cargo with a speed that bordered on reckless, sometimes kicking pallets out the back as the plane rolled to a stop, engines running, ramp down, ready to leave at a moment's notice. The missions blurred together: rice for isolated villages, howitzer shells for embattled fire bases, stretchers for the wounded. The Herc became the lifeline for troops cut off by monsoon floods or enemy encirclement. But the price was steep. Blackened wrecks dotted the jungle, silent reminders of flights that never made it home. The sense of vulnerability grew with each loss. Crews began to question how long they could keep flying unarmed, exposed, and outgunned. Enemy tactics evolved as the war dragged on. Anti-aircraft artillery grew more accurate, and the introduction of portable surface-to-air missiles raised the danger even higher. The C-130's large silhouette and predictable flight paths made it a favorite target. Some crews painted their aircraft with makeshift camouflage, hoping to blend in with the jungle below. Others relied on speed and luck. Sometimes that was all they had. Inside the cockpit and down the cargo bay, the atmosphere was tense but professional. There were no headlines for these missions, no glory for the men who loaded, flew, and unloaded in the heart of enemy territory. They were anonymous, but their work kept entire bases alive. The mounting losses forced a hard question. How much longer could the Herc hold out as just a cargo plane? The answer would come from the crews themselves, who began to imagine a different role for their trusted workhorse, one where the Herc would do more than haul cargo. It would fight back. In 1967, a handful of engineers and combat veterans gathered in a hangar at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, staring at a stripped-down C-130A. The mission was clear: turn a cargo hauler into a flying fortress. Project Gunship 2 began with hacksaws and ingenuity. Side-firing 20mm Vulcan cannons and 7.62mm miniguns were mounted along the left fuselage. Sensors and a night vision telescope were bolted to the floor, all tied to a fire control computer that looked like it belonged in a science fair. The AC-130 Spectre was born, and within weeks it was hunting trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Night after night, 14-man crews lifted off from Thai airfields, orbiting in tight left-hand turns over the jungle. The tactic was simple but deadly: keep the guns pointed at the target, use infrared and low-light television to spot convoys, and let the sensors guide the gunners. From 7,000 feet, the Spectre's guns tore through darkness, invisible to the enemy until it was too late. The nickname Death from Above was earned, one burning truck at a time. But every orbit carried risk. On February 24, 1969, during a Tet offensive support mission, a mortar round exploded inside an AC-47 gunship, the C-130's smaller predecessor. Loadmaster Sergeant John Levitow, bleeding from more than 40 shrapnel wounds, saw a burning magnesium flare rolling toward the open cargo door. The flare burned at over 4,000 degrees, hot enough to melt steel. Levitow crawled through smoke and blood, grabbed the 27-pound flare, and heaved it out just before it could ignite the ammunition. His actions saved the lives of 8 crew members. For that, he received the Medal of Honor, the only enlisted Air Force member so recognized in Vietnam for a non-pilot act of heroism. 3 years later, the cost of innovation became heartbreakingly clear. On December 21, 1972, AC-130A Spectre 17, under Major John Middleswart, was prowling the Mu Jia Pass in Laos. The crew had already destroyed 37 trucks that night, orbiting above the trail as B-52s pummeled Hanoi. Suddenly, a Soviet-made SA-7 missile streaked upward. The warhead struck the wing. In seconds, fire engulfed the aircraft. The Spectre went down with all 14 aboard. It was America's most decorated gunship crew. Every man later awarded the Silver Star for gallantry. The wreckage was found weeks later, the loss echoing through the gunship community. By war's end, a C-130 aircraft had flown more than 1,800 sorties and destroyed over 2,600 trucks, and they were credited with more than 10,000 enemy killed. Hercules crews earned 18 Air Force crosses and a single Medal of Honor, their valor etched into Air Force history. The Herc was no longer just a transport. It had become a weapons platform, a symbol of adaptability, and a reminder that every innovation carries a human price. By the early 1970s, Air Force planners began to question whether a 1950s turboprop could keep up with modern warfare. The Advanced Medium STOL Transport Program, known as AMST, was born out of that doubt. The goal was clear: replace the aging Hercules with something faster, bigger, and jet-powered. Boeing rolled out the YC-14, a high-wing, twin-jet transport with massive engines perched above the wings. McDonnell Douglas answered with the YC-15, boasting 4 jet engines and a swept-back tail. Both prototypes took to the skies in 1975, logging hundreds of test flights and dazzling onlookers with short-field takeoffs and heavy payloads. On paper, the jets outperformed the old Herc in speed and technology. But every test flight revealed a stubborn reality. The new designs burned twice as much fuel as the C-130 and demanded runways nearly as long. The price tag soared. By 1979, Congress had seen enough. Facing budget cuts and a shrinking post-Vietnam force, the Air Force cancelled AMST before a single production contract could be signed. The YC-14 went to a museum, and the YC-15 was mothballed in the desert. The story did not end there. Over the next 2 decades, the Air Force launched more replacement efforts, future transport rotorcraft and joint cargo aircraft, each promising a revolution, each collapsing under cost and complexity. In the end, the numbers always favored the Hercules. It was cheaper to upgrade than to start over. The so-called obsolete design kept flying, not because it was perfect, but because nothing else could do the job at the same price, with the same reliability. 70 years after its first flight, the C-130 Hercules is no museum piece. The same basic airframe has spawned more than 70 distinct variants, each tailored for a mission no one imagined in the 1950s. There is the AC-130 gunship, bristling with cannons and howitzers, orbiting over battlefields at night. The WC-130 Hurricane Hunter plunges into the heart of storms, collecting data where satellites fear to tread. The MC-130 slips special operators behind enemy lines, while the HC-130 refuels helicopters mid-air, keeping search and rescue teams in the fight. There is even a ski-equipped LC-130 that lands supplies on Antarctic ice, and a firefighting tanker that drops red slurry over wildfires. The Blue Angel's Fat Albert is the only cargo plane with its own fan club. Adaptable. This adaptability comes from a design that was rugged but open-ended. Engineers at Lockheed Martin, working on the latest C-130J Super Hercules, kept 90% of the original structure but swapped in new Rolls-Royce AE-2100 turboprops, a glass cockpit, and digital avionics. The result? A plane that looks familiar but takes off in just 3,000 feet, hauls heavier loads, and burns less fuel than its ancestors. Some airframes have now flown more than 45,000 hours, half again as long as their designers ever expected. Rugged. For the crews, the Hercules is more than hardware. Loadmasters who cross 1,000 combat hours earn the right to a Herc tattoo, a quiet badge that says you are part of a family stretching back generations. Grandfathers flew Hercs in Vietnam, and their grandsons fly the same tail numbers today. The plane's secret is not just in the metal. It is in the way it keeps finding new jobs and new believers every decade. Family. Today, aircrews still log hours on C-130s older than they are, because no modern replacement matches its versatility. As global conflicts shift and disaster responses grow more urgent, militaries rely on this obsolete workhorse more than ever. Sometimes the future is built on what refuses to break. The real question now is, what does it mean when the most advanced solution is the one that never leaves service? Share your thoughts below.